Good evening. We'll call the October 27th Cedar Springs Public School Board meeting to order. It is now 6:15. And if you would rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we can have a roll call, please, Secretary Rice.
Yes, trustee Bowser.
Here.
Trustee Patton. Here. Trustee Lund.
Here.
Treasurer Gilmore.
Here.
Secretary Slager. Here. Vice President Schaffner.
Here.
President Reed.
Here. Thank you, and we've established a forum for this evening's meeting. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda, and I would entertain a motion for as presented.
I'd like to make a motion to add items to the agenda, PO 5610 emergency removal. And PO 012-310, as was discussed in last meeting.
What was the first one?
First one was PO 5610, the emergency removal. The one we talked about adding.
For expulsions.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
You're looking to add that for discussion.
Correct.
Okay.
The second read of, I believe, polls, since we amended the first emergency removal one, and the second.
We have a motion to change the agenda. We have a second. So I would call a vote. Vice President Schaffner?
No.
Secretary Slager?
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Yes.
Trustee Lund?
Yes.
Trustee Patton?
Yes.
Trustee Bowser?
Yes.
President Reed? No. I believe motion carries if I add them all up. All right, so we'll add those discussion items on for discussion item E and F. Okay. All right. So that brings us to gratitudes. And I will open up the table and I'm going to jump in there with voice doctors on my final this week, Wednesday. And the football and the Eastern athletes that were going there. But so grateful that we decided to.
Yes, lots of exciting sports things. So I'll just say also gratitude, shout out to middle school cross country. We had our girls and boys middle school teams as regional champs. High school cross country, second.
Yeah.
Regionals.
Yep, the boys.
Boys.
And with the office students, that's another.
I'm grateful for the successful season of parent teacher conferences in each of the buildings. And also started to do some fall engagement nights. So Cedar View's fall engagement night is tomorrow night. And teachers have done an outstanding job putting together a collection of math and reading activities for families to come and enjoy. And then also excited the fall play is right around the corner. So there's a lot of new things happening over here at the high school.
And we might hear some fall play things in the hall.
Yeah, they're practicing tonight.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our consent items, normal business, and I would entertain a motion for as presented.
Support.
Vice President Schaffner?
Yes.
Secretary Slager?
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Yes.
Trustee Lund?
Yes.
Trustee Patton?
Yes.
Trustee Bowser?
Yes.
President Reed? Yes, motion carries. And that brings us to the work session of our meeting tonight, and we have the beginning of the year data review.
Okay, so presenting information to you this evening and answering questions that may come from the board table is Kristen Albert. Kristen really works and serves as the district's overall continuous improvement coordinator and does an outstanding job being a support member of the academic services team. Ron Barinwall is also here to support questions in regard to the secondary academic points or academic data points. Dan Scoville is sick tonight, so he was not able to be here. But I'm confident that Kristen has the ability to answer those questions that come to the table, come from the table regarding our elementary data.
Bobby. Got locked out. If you don't mind.
And Kristen's slide deck is linked in to Board Book, as well as an updated version of our comprehensive needs assessment that you first saw back in June. The update was that she had put in the additional data points that have come to us since you first reviewed that document back in June.
All right, I'll just get started. The data is going to look a little different. I'm presenting it in a different form, I guess, than what you maybe have previously seen, and I'll kind of explain the why behind that as I go. But if you guys have questions, just feel free to stop me and ask. I might move through some rather quickly, but it might be a lot for you to process in the sitting. So you obviously you have the slide deck with that information. So if you want to go back and look, I'm going to have further questions later. You're welcome to reach out. All right, so I just appreciate this quote, and it's one that I start all of our data meetings with because sometimes when we talk about data, it feels really, people feel vulnerable, but as we have to just recognize our growth edges in order for help us to move forward and be better. So that's kind of the motto we've been rolling with this year as we work with our teams in every building, is that we have a lot of celebrations in our district. And when we talk about data, we have to look at both those celebrations and those growth edges in order for us to even get better than where we're at right now. So our overall goal moving into this school year is increasing academic achievement through the whole child support. So we have had a lot of focus on a lot of behavior goals, social emotional learning, and student mental health in order to enable students to feel excited about coming to school, to feel welcome, to feel safe. And all of those are very important. We also want to acknowledge that the purpose of school is to increase that academic achievement, because the ultimate goal of school is for graduation, and that requires academic achievement in order to get those credits for them to be successful and leave us and be productive members of our world. And so this presentation in particular is going to focus on the academic sense versus some of those behavioral pieces. And as the year goes on, we'll collect more of that behavior data as the year goes on to be able to give you updates on how we're moving through that part later on the school year. iReady is one of data point that you guys are familiar with. We've presented before. Our K-8 students take it 3 times a year. It's a benchmark assessment, and that assesses all standards in both reading and math. And that includes early reading skills, comprehension, vocabulary, a lot of different pieces of the reading world, as well as all the pieces of the math world, like algebra, geometry, and the different domains that go with each of those. It's standards-based, meaning that it's aligned directly to our standards that we're expected to be teaching, and it's criterion referenced. That means that the scores that it produces are directly tied to their achievement within those standards. There are other benchmark assessments that are norm referenced, and those scores are more derived by how student compared to other peers. This is not compared to others, other peers or other students here or elsewhere. It's compared to the standards we are expecting them to be mastering when they leave us. I'm going to talk about scale scores versus proficiency. In the past, we've presented a lot of reports to you. Speaking of proficiency, we want to gauge students' proficiency, but that can mean different things to different people. If I stood in front of you and said, talked about my age, but I didn't tell you my age, and I said, I've lived 50% of my life, you guys might be able to all guess my age, but it might be different based on your frame of reference, right? And so when we talk, some of the proficiency reports is similar to that. You might think that students are or aren't proficient when we're looking at some of the reports in iReady because of the language that's used. But when we look at the scale scores, which would be my age, specifically that number, the scale scores is a specific number and it's real, and then we don't have to generalize and make assumptions about what that means. So I'm going to shift our focus and think more about the scale scores so that we can have more raw and real data to use so that we can all make meaning together, and then it doesn't change based on what time of year we're looking at. So As an example, this is a report on proficiency in iReady. So this was end of school year last year for Beach. This is just an example of what I just explained to you. So that green with the lines is what we would be aiming for proficiency. In the world of teaching, in a lot of places, green means go. And a lot of times we would add the 38 and the 29 and say they're all green, they're all proficient. But if you look, that solid green is early on grade level. So they're on grade level, but if they're early on at the end of the year, they're early fourth grade at the end of fourth grade, that they're not actually proficient. So some of the information we've been sharing in different ways has led us to believe different things. Now, the same group of students, the beginning of the year this year, this is their graph. And then you think, did they really lose from 38% down to 10% over the summer? Is that summer slide that big? How did from the end of the year it go from this to this? They didn't lose that much. The reason is because iReady is criterion referenced. And once a fourth grader becomes a fifth grader or a third grader becomes a fourth grader, now they're assessed on fourth grade standards in fourth grade. If they test at the end of third grade level, that's considered a year behind, but they might not actually be that far behind. So again, just a visual demonstration of why I'm not going to use these pictures and graphs and go to the scale scores to create meaning that's helpful for all of us. And it'll stay consistent no matter what time of year we're talking about the data, if that makes sense. Is there any questions about that so far? All right, so this is a chart with a lot of numbers. I'm not going to spend a ton of time digging. I'm going to show you this in relation to where our students are. But this is an example of those ranges of the scale scores actually that are expected at each grade level. So now when I show you the numbers, you can have a frame of reference of where those numbers are falling for each of our grade levels at different points in the year. So here's an overview. If you look at the history, and this is all beginning of the school year, of what students in each grade level achieved at the beginning of the school year every year since the 22-23 school year. We see there's a few years that you can see a little incline. Now, when we're talking scale scores, a few points does make a difference. So if we were seeing a gradual incline, but it was only 3 points a year, that'd be positive. Overall, though, our data is relatively flat for the beginning of the year. And so we're hoping to make some changes, and I'll explain some of those things through the lens of continuous improvement that we're working on to try to change this to make more of an incline graph. But as you look at it, our beginning of the year scores, this is the average score for students in reading at the beginning of the year, every year since then. Similarly, not similarly. So here it is mapped out. So I put the actual numbers onto the scale score graph, and I put them in the boxes that encompass it. When you look at that yellow bar, that's considered one grade level behind. So the scale scores that are popping up for our students at the beginning of the year are showing on average. Now, average would be the middle. Half of those kids are achieving right into that at grade level area, but half of them are not. So that's why the average is showing there in the yellow. We are hoping that our average could pop up back to that green area. So we have some work to do. I just put at the top corner that typical growth points. As you can see in kindergarten and first grade, the younger grades have a potential of gaining a lot of points in a school year. Think back to when you have children, your children were babies, and they could, from 0 to 1, they went from, infant to now walking, right? The trajectory for young children for learning is huge. And as they get older, not that they can't learn, just learning looks different. And so this way that score shows up in, where their skills show up in scores just slows. And so we want to hit those early grade levels really hard, because that's where we would have the best chance of shifting things for the trajectory going on past those early years. Because kids in kindergarten could perhaps make 50 points growth in a typical year, as calculated by iReady, what typical kids would grow. So that's for reading. Is there any questions so far? Okay. And then this is the math graph. And as you can see, like kindergarten down here, kindergarten had 3 years. That was actually an incline. And I know it doesn't look like much, but again, when we're increasing a few points every year, that's positive, but those are kids coming into us, right? So we don't have a lot of control over how they come into us unless we're, helping them with preschool prior to them coming to us. So, because this is the beginning of the year data points. So there is a slight increase in kindergarten. A lot of the other data points are relatively flat. And again, we're not doing bad things. This is our real data. We want to, again, help enable our students to not just maintain, but close that gap. And so our beginning of the year averages should be slowly ticking up over time. It'll take time to do that year after year, but we can do that. So we've been talking a lot about that in our team meetings, about those strategies our teams can use to make those increases. And then so similarly, I mapped out where those math scores fall with those scaled scores. Those are the averages. And as you can see, when you get down to 8th grade, they have even a bigger gain because they're right. 492 is right at the end of that 2 years behind level. So we want, again, to push all of those beginning of the year scores up, because if students are starting at grade level or more students are starting at grade level, they have more of a chance to maintain it. Historically, we're good at maintaining where kids already achieve. It's harder for us to close that gap. And we have a lot of great things in place, and I'll talk through some of the extra things or more things we're doing this year to try to conquer that. But again, it starts really early, right? Because again, those early grades have the biggest potential to make those gains, and so that then down the road, they can work on maintaining instead of closing the gaps. Are there any questions about that?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Do you think that we've now gotten through from COVID? Like, because the kids were very behind.
Yeah.
After COVID, are you seeing now that we've kind of gotten over that hump?
I mean, I think that COVID impacted students and families in a variety of ways. So I think there's probably always going to be some dominoes out there. But in terms of learning, our kindergartners, let's see, my son was in kindergarten when that happened, and he's now a 6th grader. I think that's right. So I mean, so if you look at those 6th graders when they were in kindergarten, they've had well, if you look at 5th graders, 5th grade and down then would have had a more normal K through 5 career-ish. Maybe their kindergarten year was a little wonky, right? That year after was a little bit goofy for a lot of families and schools. So, but as you can see, like, we're not really seeing, it's very consistent, right? It's not like even 5th grade to 6th grade and 7th grade and some of those kids who were impacted, and the ones that, again, not saying COVID didn't impact those students in a different way who weren't in school yet. It did. But again, judging by how consistent our scores are, it just feels like we are more in the groove of this is where we're at and this is how we're achieving. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and COVID really is one of the things that studies have repeatedly shown is that it's affected different groups of the population differently. So, and typically that's aligned with the socioeconomic band of the family. So, students that were predicted to be successful pre-COVID, or who were on a trajectory that was a success, oriented trajectory, bounced back more quickly, had less negative impacts on their it's not just their learning, but it's a lifestyle. It's it's a lifestyle, it's screen time, it's a combination of factors that are impacting the development of children more significantly than any other collection of factors in time in recorded history. So it's COVID, but it's also screen time. It's also social media. There's so many different things at play that to pin our where we are from an academic perspective on one factor would be to deny a lot of the things that are impacting.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. So, I also mapped out summer slide for you, just because I know, again, based on that first graph, you might think, oh my goodness, we have a huge summer slide. That's, again, the iReady and how it's judging kids based on the criteria for the current grade level. So when you actually look at, and I put the reason that blue dot is down at the bottom, because the kindergartners were not here last year. So the first dot, that would be first grade, those are the students were end of year kindergarten, and now where they were here at beginning of year first grade. So those are the same students to show that summer slide, which, again, there's a couple that grade levels that are slightly tipped down, but overall it's pretty stagnant. Our summer slide is pretty flat, which is good. That's a good thing. So our students may lose a little bit, but not a ton. So that's not a huge thing for us to focus on to overcome per se. Because we have to work on what we can do while they're here at school. So summer is a very small factor. Do you have a question? Yeah.
So why do we even do beginning of year testing? Like, if we know that we're not preparing kids in year five to come into fifth grade with fifth grade knowledge, why do we even do beginning of year testing?
Yeah, well, a lot of the beginning of the year testing informs that next year, because so like I said, like in fifth grade, they're assessing fifth grade standards, and that does help a fifth grade teacher then dig into to know within their standards what they need to do to intervene. So the meetings that we have on a regular basis throughout the year, we go back and we do analyze that from the perspective of what are my standards right now.
Right, like where we need the gap, where the kids left.
Right.
And get them up to. Okay,
Exactly.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep,
I
no
have a
problem.
question. This data might not be on there, but for the summer slide, the kids read now program that we switched
Yep.
to, can you see an impact from switching to that, or is that not quite something?
I didn't map out prior year's summer slide, and I could do that just for informational purposes to see if it's significantly different. I mean, I would guess we had decent amount of participation. Not every kid read every book, but or logged every book, I should say, within the program. But that was a positive experience for a lot of our families, and that could have potentially impacted ELA scores. But I didn't map out prior summers to compare. And then here's the math. Again, math, there's that second grade took a pretty big dip. A few took more of a dip than others, but so those teachers, again, the beginning of the year, they'll be able to see where that dip took place to be able to fill in those gaps as they move through the school year. There is a little summer slide for some of those grade levels, but not huge. Is there any questions about the math?
I'm sorry.
No, you're
How
okay.
do they compare with, before I think when we were doing the bars, we sometimes talk about, Kent County here, we talk about how we stack up versus our peers kind of in the same geographic area and then maybe the state.
Sure.
Do they convert to the same kind of, so we can still do some benchmarking?
Yeah, not all of our districts in Kent County and across the state use iReady, so we don't usually use those comparisons for the iReady assessment. But when we bring those out, that is through the lens of the MSTEP or the PSAT and SAT, and those are the tests that everybody countywide uses. I do have our data. I did not put the comparative data in here, but it is something that I could get to you for other districts in the county for both of those. Yep. There's a place marker here for the high school benchmark. So last year, you guys voted on to help. We use grant funds. You guys voted to get IXL for the high school. And the high school has been really using that and harnessing its potential. And the high school actually now has the ability to do an iReady like assessment through IXL. So the ELA and math teachers this fall tried it out. Not all of their students were assessed. That's why I don't have a graph on here. About 50% participated. Part of that is them working out some kinks about when it's appropriate, which classes it's appropriate to do the testing in, whether sore time could be used, that new time that they have built into their schedule. And so some of those kinks we're working out, but we're hoping that as this year goes, we will be able to build the high school's portfolio more similarly to the K-8 world, so that we can have more frequent data points for us to show that growth over time with also our high school students. We just haven't had that data point in the past. We've had the PSAT, and I have that. It's in the comprehensive needs assessment, and I also have it on a slide. But that only is, again, assessed in the spring, and then, you know, it's now this school year, and they took it last year. So it just it's not quite as helpful with the actionable things that we could do throughout the school year to monitor how we're doing with the things we put in place. So I just wanted to make you aware that that's something we're dabbling with implementing. It's just not fully implemented yet. So again, you guys have the copy of the comprehensive needs assessment. I updated it. It does say 24-25 because again, it's all those data points, the M-STEP and the PSAT that didn't come out till right now. So I updated it with that. There are still a few data points, absences and graduation rates that are still hanging out there because the My School data site has not published that information yet. When that gets published, that'll be also inserted in there. And then I'll start another column to start gathering this year's data that we can have that as a record for all of you to stay updated. Is there any questions about that? So this is, again, this snapshot straight from the comprehensive needs assessment. So this exact format is in the full document, but just so you could see it here today, this is the English language arts for 3rd grade through 11th grade. This would be the data point that could be compared countywide. I didn't bring that comparison today, but I could bring it at a future meeting if that's of interest. So there's the how we fell on ELA. And again, as you look, you can see that there's some grade levels that made some jumps and some not as much. It's interesting to see that continuum across the board. There's not necessarily, I think that 8th grade is the most consistent, you know, in moving up and maintaining it a little bit. But most grade levels are kind of up and down.
And this data was embarked when we were here in the fall.
Yeah.
In the fall, so that's what I'm
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you look diagonally, you can kind of see that the trajectory of the same class. So like these 3rd graders were in this grade level, then this grade level, then this grade level. So it's also interesting to do the diagonal look as well as the across. And then here's the math. Math, we have quite a few more increases, which is really exciting. And then science. Social studies. Got some good growth in social studies from last year to this year, or even from historical. So that's really exciting to see. I know that our CKLA curriculum that we've been using is has a lot more science and social studies content built in, and that could be a reason why, which would be super positive. Could be a why. I enjoy this quote by Henry Ford, because sometimes we can lose the forest through the trees, or sometimes the best idea is just one that hasn't been thought of yet. We want to make what we're doing bigger and better, and sometimes we just have to like cash it in and start with a new innovative idea. So we've been stretching some limits this year in terms of some of our data dialogues to think about data a little bit differently. And some of that it has to do with looking at that comprehensive needs assessment that I shared with all of you, so that teachers can then have access to more data points to say, oh, we've been trying to teach this better in our classrooms, but really we have an attendance issue, and that could be the reason that's impacting reading. that's not necessarily an accurate statement. I just was using that as an example. But there could be other dominoes found as we look at all the data together rather than just in isolation. So we're trying to do that this year and have different types of conversations that not only zero in on what a teacher is teaching, but also some of the systems we have as a district that are supporting students in the right ways. So again, at the beginning of the year, I shared with you on our MyKIP. Our MyKIP plan now is focused more on that systems level work. And the goal this year was to build alignment. So we took what was built into the systems level goals from our MyKIP plan, what we put in for the state of Michigan. And we tasked our buildings and then from the building level down to the PLC level to connect those goals. Prior to this year, there was a lot of really good things happening, but there was a lot of goals. The building might have identified different goals than the district, and the PLCs might have identified a different goal from that. And so different people were choosing which goal they were focusing on because we all can't focus on all the things when there's a buffet of 10 things in front of us. So we can all kind of work together through the lens and know truly what we're targeting and what we're working on together. We can better evaluate whether it's working. So that alignment is huge for us this year. So that's kind of that lens of continuous improvement, what we're doing about the data. We're trying to create that alignment so that we're hyper-focused and targeted, making those connections so that every classroom is working on the same types of things through that to that end goal. And all the layers then are also collaborating and talking to make sure that we're progressing. So that's new, and I hopefully will see that making a difference this year. So again, this is the Cedar Trails connection. This is beach. There's a lot of words here. I'm not going to read it to you. You guys do have access to it, but you can kind of see how they're thinking. The building level goals relate to the systems, but they become a little more specific. And then again, the PLCs, like a third grade student at beach or third grade teacher at beach, now takes this and says, what does that look like in third grade versus second grade? And gets a little more specific. So again, they're targeting the same goal within their classrooms. And Cedar View. Middle school. High school. I will say at every building, there's some really exciting things happening through this lens. They're really, you can see it like middle school because they didn't have that hawk time before. They're really thinking about in their buildings and PLCs, what are we doing every PLC about this? So they're making a point to every single meeting that we provide for them. This Thursday, they'll have PLC time. And they're talking about how are we using that hawk time to support our students and what data do we have to reinforce that? And those conversations haven't necessarily been present in every PLC before. So again, the connection of how can our building support the hawk time to make that most effective for students is huge for the middle school, and high school again is doing the same thing. At the PLCs, they're going to use that IXL data and the formative assessment data they have in their classrooms to then inform what students get during that SOAR time, because that SOAR time by definition is meant to address those specific needs of students. So that's all I have. Do you have any other questions for me? Okay. Appreciate your time. Yes, thank you.
All right, that ends our work session information, and that moves us to discussion items. So we'll begin with discussion item A, high school course proposed name change for Ron Aaron, and that is on for action this week.
Yeah, so any questions on the proposal that I presented last meeting on changing pre-calc to AP pre-calc? Pretty straightforward one. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming at second night.
No problem.
All right. Okay, moving on to our finance update with Marty.
All right, normally I'd just go over this real quick, sitting down, but we have quite a bit to, I kind of like to go over with the adoption of the new state budget. Make this a little bit bigger. So as usual, we have a year-to-date budget to actual on a cash basis. This is the first time seeing the budget to actual for the 2025-26 school year. It is through September 30th, 2025. Any questions on that? We also have the bond budget as usual. So a couple highlights of the 25-26 school aid budget. It was passed signed into law on October 17th. The state government did avoid a state government shutdown. They didn't have the budget passed before by the deadline of 9/30, but they did do a kind of a 7-day budget to get them to avoid that state government shutdown. And then within that 7 days, the House and Senate agreed on Senate Bill 166. Moved it on to the governor for her signature, and she passed it on October 17th. Highlights of this budget included a $442 increase to the per pupil foundation allowance. It continued the universal free breakfast and lunch for all students. That was a top priority for the governor, and I know lawmakers throughout the state were catching a lot of heat for the possibility of not continuing that program. 31A at-risk funding was increased by 25%. And then something to really keep an eye on moving forward is, I think we've previously discussed one of the kind of linchpins of this budget was how to fund infrastructure and road improvements. Originally, they were talking how to fund $3 billion worth of improvements. I think it came down to closer to $2 billion. Part of what they did, so part of that $2 billion infrastructure package is they shifted $390 million of higher ed costs from the general fund, general purpose budget onto the school aid budget, bringing the grand total up to $851 million of school aid funds that is supposed to go to K-12 education is now funding community colleges and state colleges and universities throughout the state. So that is something districts will keep an eye on because obviously has a lot of per pupil funding that's not going to K-12 education right now. We will do a quick review of attachments 2 and 3. Section 31AA implications. This is actually a separate agenda item, so we'll cover that in a few minutes. The fall count was October 1st. It was a good count. This is the first count since I've been here for 3.5 years that our enrollment went up. So that was very good to see. This is an unaudited number. So Erica will be submitting our fall count data to the state. They will then start reviewing it and go through a count audit, and we will have audited numbers. I believe late November, early December is when we'll have certified fall count. So this number is subject to change, but this is where it stands as of now. So this column here is our spring count. So the count from February of this year. So that would have been last school year. That counts for 10% of our current year state aid membership. This column here is our fall 2025 count. So the count from the first of this month. You can see our numbers went up 23.35 FTEs. So when you add that all up, we are coming to a state aid membership, a projected state aid membership of 2,971 FTEs. Compare that to our 24-25 membership, we are down 25.5 FTEs. But we'll see on, I believe it's attachment 3, we actually, that's better than what we budgeted back in June. So that's a positive variance on our budget amendment. Will be a positive variance in budget amendment 1. And then just something else to be on your radar. Open enrollment will start. We have open enrollment starting November 12th, running through November 30th of next month. I know last year we kind of gave you the heads up. So once again, the premiums that we are being charged have increased greater than the cap amount, that Public Act 152. So last year was like a 7.5% increase to our premiums, and that cap went up 0.2%. It's not quite that bad this year, but this year our premiums went up 9.1%, which was the pool average, and that cap increased 2.9%. So once again, the employees will have to pick up that difference through employee shared premiums. That will be a payroll withholding. Just like we did last year, we did go to the pool and work with them to offer some new benefit plans that are maybe that are lower cost to the employees. It might not be as robust coverage, but depending on the personal needs of that employee and his or her family, they might not need that full robust plan. And they can then choose a lower cost plan that fits their needs. So if I am healthy, I never go to the doctor, I never use medication, I can select a plan that we are offering, one plan that will be no cost to single family or full family, single, double, or full family participants. So, well, yes, the plans are going up, but we're offering some new plans that are lower cost. Any questions on that?
I just a question, and I should remember this because I don't, but for the count, why do we have partial, like the decimals? Is that for like half these students or partial enrollment or?
Yeah, so most of the partial FTEs are at the secondary level, so middle school, but primarily at high school. So let's say we have a student that takes 4 classes, they're a 0.8. And then also our special ed students, they only count towards special ed FTE when they're in contact with special ed educators. So the time that they're in passing or at lunch, that counts as a gen ed FTE. So we don't have any 1.0 special ed students.
Thank you.
This is just a quick kind of summary of the comparisons between the executive, Senate, and House budgets that were previously released compared to Senate Bill 166. But I really want to kind of focus on attachment 2 and 3. So attachment 2, I just kind of took a look at, all right, let's compare the 24-25 budget to what was passed in 25-26. And let's just assume we did not lose any FTEs. It stayed the same. We maintained the 2,996 state aid membership. So I took those numbers, plugged them into the calculator, factored in our changes in property tax value. And also factored in, so last year, we did not receive a per pupil state aid membership increase, if you remember correctly. And instead, we received the section 147A4 MEPSR's cost offset. So I calculated that out to be about $386 per pupil. Well, this year, they eliminated that. So we don't have any of that. In its place, they increased the foundation allowance by $442. But if you net those two, the increase is $56. So on average, an average increase over the last 2 years in effect was $26 over the last 2 years on average per pupil increase. So I think I've kind of used that graphic in the past of the solo cups and the shell game. that's what we're kind of talking about, because right now in the media, it would be advertised as historic high funding. This is the highest state aid per pupil foundation allowance in history. And that is correct. That's not, a made up statement, but they're leaving out the other part where last year we didn't get one, and what we said you were getting instead has now been taken away. So factor all of this in. Another big part of this, if we didn't lose any FTEs, the Section 29 enrollment stabilization that we receive, we would receive $0 this year compared to $400,000 last year. So you factor all of that in, and our net revenues would go down $60,000. So that 4.6% increase isn't as great as advertised. But that's not our reality that we're looking at. Attachment 3 is looking at what the adopted budget compared to what we'll be looking at for Amendment 1. Big change here. We budgeted for a state aid membership of 2945. We're looking closer to 2971, so a 26 FTE increase. So that definitely helps out a lot. So if we scroll down here, you can see our enrollment stabilization is going down 92,000, but we're making up for that with the additional FTEs. That's about almost a 28% increase to our at-risk funding. Again, that's highly restricted, so you can't just use it on whatever the district needs. It is very restrictive what we can use it on. And then but I'm forecasting, I had budgeted 340,000 for Section 31AA. Right now I'm forecasting around 450,000. So the positive variance for adopted compared to Amendment 1 right now is what I'm projecting, about a $625,000 or $626,000 increase in funding, primarily driven by that increase in our FTEs. Any questions on that? All right, then we will move on to next item. So I believe it was early last week, Jesse Nelson, he is a partner with Baker Tilly, a CPA and financial advisory firm, reached out and said, hey, just wanted to have a meeting with you. As of now, the interest rates are starting to get down to a level where it may make sense to refinance the 2016 bond. So on Wednesday, I had a call with him, and he just kind of walked me through the process. But I wanted to give you kind of the highlights of the conversation. So if we were to refinance, this would have to take place in January, because there's a 10-year kind of waiting period between when you issue a bond and when you can actually refinance it. So after 10 years, districts can then refinance. So if we were to refinance in January, first quarter of next year, right now, we would refinance for $4.6 million. We'd have, right here would be our issuance costs, so about $126,000, which would come out of that $4.6 million that we're receiving on the reissuance. The net savings right now is projected to be $132,000. So that's the net that we would save taxpayers in interest payments going into the future. Jesse said, right now it's not like he's jumping up and down screaming from the top of the building saying you have to do this right now. But he does feel like the interest rates have gone down enough. He thinks it's it's definitely something to consider. Could that number go up? This 132, that could go up. He said, realistically, if everything went well, that might go up to 150,000. Alternatively, it could go down to 110. So it's not something that the board has to take action on right now. I wanted to get it out in front of you so you can start chewing on that. And maybe in November we can discuss it a little bit further. I believe there will be a Fed meeting before the November 10th board meeting. So we'll kind of know if rates have gone down even further or if they've gone up. And then we can direct Jesse, hey, let's start getting this ball rolling. The only risk that we have is once we say, hey, let's do this, there is an S&P rating that we would have to receive. And there is a fee associated with that. It's about a $20,000 to $21,000 fee that comes out of these issuance costs. But let's say we have the S&P do that rating, $20,000, and then rates spike up again, and it just no longer makes sense to refinance. Well, at that point, we've signed a contract with S&P. They've provided the service, so the district would then have to pay that $20,000, whether or not we actually do that bond refund. So that's kind of the only risk associated with this. If we get the ball rolling and interest rates go up and it no longer makes sense to do it, if we've ordered the S&P rating, we will have to pay for it.
You said this decision had to be made in January. So how soon would we have to make the decision here for that rating to occur? November, December?
I think the rating would probably, we can't take action. We can't issue the debt before January. So I didn't get that far along in the discussion with Jesse as far as the timeline of when we would do the S&P rating. I said, hey, the call was a perfect timing because it gave us an opportunity to have the discussion tonight. So maybe after the November meeting, we can give him some direction as what the board would like to do.
Yeah, I would think we'd want to do whatever we can timeline wise to minimize that risk, for a quicker turnover.
Yeah, well, we won't be the risk is, this is a projection, but we won't know the rates until January, and that's the first we can actually start taking action.
First of all, always for saving taxpayer dollars. It just seems like something to pursue for sure.
And we can ask him to start kind of get the ball rolling and then get up to the point of, all right, you have to make that decision on the S&P ratings. Let's get there and hold. Up until that point, there's no cost to the district. So he said they can start doing the legwork now if that's what you would choose, or we can wait.
I'm here looking to kind of get a straw poll here. I think it makes sense to say taxpayer dollars and go ahead and make it for that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right.
Move on to 31 AA.
All right, 31 AA. So new to 31 AA this year. This is not the first year that the state has had a Section 31 AA funding available. But what is new is there's now 3 components of it. Subsection 2 is districts have to opt in or out to receive it, and the board will have to opt in. Districts have until November 16th to opt in. There's subsection 4 and 5, which are competitive grants. Subsection 4 relates to SROs and school safety dogs, and subsection 5 relates to hiring new support staff for student mental health. It's section 2 that has caused a lot of debate, because new to this section is the requirement that districts that opt in are mandated to waive client attorney privileges if there is a mass casualty event in the district. And it does not provide a timeline. It's kind of an indefinite waiver, so they can go back and look at attorney communications as far back as they want or as far forward as they want. And when I say client attorney privileges, you are the client. The board is the client of the attorneys. So there's a lot of discussion amongst superintendents, business officials. What does this really mean? Attached the Troon e-blast, and they kind of highlight a lot of their potential implications of accepting these funds. The number one concern being that waiver of attorney-client privilege. And I know Scott has sat in on a Clark Hill webinar. I think Troon was probably a little more of the cautious, risk-averse
Cautious.
opinion.
So I sat in on a workshop on Friday morning with the county superintendents, and there's talk about the possibility of districts, individual members of the district, individual members of the Board of Education losing their governmental immunity, so acting in good faith on behalf of the government. In the event, again, like Marty said, of a mass casualty event, there's some question if whether or not that would continue to move forward if we accepted these funds. But the other big question mark is really centered on the attorney-client privilege of the communication, protecting that attorney-client communication between either us as a district, you as individual board members. And so that's where the question really sits right now. There's a lot of speculation. And of course, attorneys, their job is to paint the worst case scenario for us, provide us with the greatest measure of protection as possible. So Troon's initial letter was very stark. It was very, they really took a worst case scenario in terms of the protections that we currently have that we would no longer have moving forward. Clark Hill's interpretation was maybe they went a little far in one direction. Clark Hill really tried to present more of a middle of the line type scenario. There's just a lot of, there will be a lot of things that are eventually determined in the court, because attorneys can interpret the law, but ultimately a judge is required to make a finding on the law. And so it's something that really what we're doing is holding until we can get as much information as we can, so that we can provide you with the best information possible in terms of what direction we should take moving forward. This is a really an unprecedented move on the part of the state. It is related to the lack of some heat that the state got following the Oxford mass casualty events, and so they're trying to just establish some greater parameters in terms of what the state can do as far as investigation goes, and they're holding funds hostage essentially in order to make this happen. There are concerns around, what defines a mass casualty event. Is it a fight at a football game or a basketball game? There's just so many questions. The lack of clarity is very difficult. We just need to make sure that we are very aware of what we would be saying no to if we said yes to accepting these funds.
So if we don't accept them, what does that do? What's the money? What's that do to us and where does that leave us?
So I budgeted, the adopted budget included $340,000 of new 31A funds, because we do have some 31A funds that carried over from previous.
Those would not be under this new rule.
Those are not under the new rule, so we can continue to use those and we don't have to waive any privilege. So it would be a $340,000 hit to the budget that was adopted in June. Based on the funding that they ended up passing, I have projected about, if the district were to opt in, it'd be about $450,000. So saying no in effect would put a $340,000 additional hole in the budget.
But if, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But opting in, we could get an additional 110.
But there are some very interesting requirements around the spending timeline for the new dollars. And so just because we get them doesn't mean that we could spend them in a way that really had a positive impact on our students. That's the difficult thing about dollars that are the flow through as a grant mechanism. There are oftentimes timelines in place, and so you're spending money on things that maybe aren't necessarily in the best long-term interest because they have to be spent in a short window. So we could spend dollars on staffing, and we've got dollars to cover that position for 2025, 2026, but we may not have those dollars for 2026, 2027, and so then we invested in a position, it was good for a year, but now those dollars are gone. So either we have to cut that position or we have to make up for it in another way within the budget. And so it's a very complex equation.
Yeah, and some of the items that some positions that we budgeted in 25, 26 using 31AA, we could shift to 31A with that 25% increase. They would kind of fall under allowable expense for that at-risk pool bucket of money.
Without all this extra legal stuff.
Correct.
And so we would be looking to take action on this in a November meeting?
Yes.
Yeah,
The board will have to take action to opt in or out November 10th because we have to respond to the state by November 16th. Unless you have a special meeting.
So if there's key findings that they're anticipating coming during the week of the 10th, that may serve the board well to hold a special meeting later in that week, a second meeting, just for the 31 clarification.
November 16th is due Sunday, November 16th at 11:59 p.m. So I think gave you the weekend.
So at the attorney conference on Thursday, we're really trying to avoid this topic for obvious reasons. But at the end, it did come up that they did start chatting a little bit about it. And one of the things that they brought up was the potential of however many districts opt in versus those that opt out. It could increase the funds potentially. So, some of the smaller districts might get windfall.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about that on Friday morning too. So there's $200 million set aside for this line in the budget. So if only one district across the state opted in, in theory, they could net $200 million. In actuality, what would likely happen is the legislation would act to reallocate those funds. And it wouldn't be a pot of $200 million. It would be a pot of $500,000. And then they would reallocate that $195 $200,995,000, or whatever that number was, they would reallocate those funds to another line in the budget. So while they've got a set aside for 200 million, if they don't get significant interest, they would reallocate those funds
Yeah, and
very quickly.
so it's the November 16th deadline. I believe they want to distribute the funds with the December state aid, so 12/20, and then you have until June 30th of 26 to fully spend it. But you can request a 1 year, a 12-month extension. So in effect, you have until June 30th, 2027 to fully spend these dollars. Any funds that aren't spent by then are then remitted back to the state. But in in that scenario, if a district got $200 million, I don't know if any of you seen the movie Brewster's Millions with Richard Pryor and John Candy, but he has to spend $30 million in 30 days, and it's you have to get pretty creative, and it's very difficult. So the likelihood of if we got $1 million, we would have to think very hard about how to actually spend those within a 18-month period.
This budgeting cycle has been incredibly difficult. Business and finance specialists, in districts across the state, it's very difficult to do any type of meaningful long-term planning when you don't have a sense of where your budget is going to be. And it may sound great, yeah, we got the money, we can add positions this year, but in order for those positions to have real impact, they have to be integrated deeply into the plan. They have to be a part of the work. It can't just be a one-time fix. It just doesn't. You don't have long-term success when you're trying to live like that year to year. Be a feast or famine.
So just for clarification, this is a one-time opt-in or opt-out?
The funding is one time. It's unclear if you're waiving your privilege, your client attorney privilege forever.
Good question. And it's not just forever into the future. If there's an investigation on an incident and there's some relevancy to circumstances from 5 years ago, there's question about, well, what does that mean? Can they lean into that record from 5 years ago because it's pertinent to the details of the existing investigation?
So just thinking through that, I want to make sure we digest it, and I want to probably need some time to think about it, but I know, right, we have gone into closed session to discuss security and security protocols per Open Meeting Act, you're allowed to do that. And we've met with consultants. So through the course of that, all of your security protocols could be made public, compromising future security of the school. Is that correct?
Correct.
It'd all be foilable.
Oh,
Well, that's one of the concerns that they would raise is potentially all of that would be foilable and available to anyone who wants it.
Another way to look at it is because of the public opinion that the schools should be teaching more academics and not quite so much, social emotional pieces. That loan could be another reason to turn on the money as well as the liability. The extra tentacles that.
I think it really leaves us exposed, not that we're hiding anything by any means, but it's
Crazy world out there.
why are they finding funds to something that the attorney-client privilege, that just seems very odd.
What other kind of workplace does that?
So,
I asked Scott, is it even legal? And I don't know if that has been answered.
No, because it's
But I guess as an individual, I don't know if it's legal. You know, obviously the district is not an individual, it's an entity. So,
So
Too
it's,
many unknowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but the entity is making a decision that impacts the individuals within the organization.
Mhm.
So, and it potentially it's future members of the team or past members of the team, so. It's both from the board table and from the district table. It's a fascinating time.
sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but
And all that came with budget. Coming back for now. See it again when time for you. All right, let's go forward to bond construction updates.
Okay, so I broke this down into kind of two categories of work. One is future planning, and then the second is really focusing on the wrap up of some existing projects that we have going around the district. We've been working with both Triangle and GMB on planning the work for the 2026 summer of 2026 cycle. We really want to make sure that we are ahead of the game, ahead of the wave. That we've got our plans in place. And so we're able to really time that presentation of projects to our contractors during the bidding cycle to maximize the dollars that we have that we'll be putting on the table for potential projects. And so we've done two walkthroughs on campus, really narrowing down our focus, both in terms of scope. Once we've then narrowed our scope, we're going to be able to really lean in and get a sense of the costs associated with each of those projects. Our goal is going to be to present you with a series of projects with recommendations based on how many dollars we have available to spend. And so it'll be, you'll have an opportunity. Maybe it's going to be the case that all of the projections are going to be doable under the current set of dollars that we have available to us. It may be the case that we have to set aside some of these projects as alternates. So in the event that we can't, depending on the bids, if they don't come in as low as we hope, then some of the projects may have to be factored in as an alternate. But those will all be things that we'll be putting together some reports for the board to be considering, so that you can give us some direction as far as where we want to move forward in terms of our project design and orientation for the summer of 2026. Some things that we are really focused on. One is the trails parking. We really like to separate the drop-off loop from the overall traffic flow of pedestrians. Right now, the drop-off loop is around the perimeter of the parking lot. And so any families who are bringing their children to trails to walk them into the front door, they've got to walk through that 2-lane drop-off loop. And that creates some safety concerns. And so we've been working on a couple of different designs to separate that drop-off loop or handoff loop, to separate that from the parking area. And so one of the designs that we were looking at really was a positive concept, but I think because it infringed on some wetlands and we didn't really have clarity around how that was going to impact the overall scope of the plan with the DEQ or with Eagle. We've kind of moved away from that more dynamic project or proposal, but we've got another concept that would enable us to do the same thing, to separate that drop off or handoff loop from the parking, but do it at a much smaller price tag. And so that's one of the things that we'll be looking to consider. And then really a big focus on making sure that our roads are in good shape. Adding some, in some cases, we'll just be doing a coat, a seal coat over the top. In some areas, we'll need to do some complete rebuilds because the substructure is such that it needs to be redone. In other cases, we'll be able to do just a grind and then a repaving of the top layer of asphalt. And so really it's gonna be a combination of those three solutions that we'll be looking at to make sure that when we are buttoned up at the end of the 26 construction cycle, that we'll have a quality road network across the district. That's been something that, you know, we heard about when we put this original proposal on the table for voters to consider in 2019, and it was also something that we had heard, hey, you haven't fixed the roads yet, when we brought it back out to the table in 2020. So that's seems to be a high priority for us. And then we also want to make sure that our sidewalks and our walking paths, paved walking paths, are all in good shape and they're going to the right spots. And so that's another big kind of component. So we got the trail parking lot drop off route. We've got our roads, we've got our sidewalks and paved trails. And then the last thing that we're looking at is potential expansion. When we initially built the early childhood center and did the design for the early childhood center in the administration building, right now we've got a parking lot on the south side, kind of the southwest side of the west facing entrance. So between the early childhood center and Beach Elementary School, there's a parking lot as you walk out the door to the left. But in the original plan, there was also a parking lot that was to the right. And so we eliminated that early on in the scope of the first series of bond expenditures, because we didn't know if that was a need or a want at the time. It does get busy at the early childhood center during drop off and pickup time. And so we do see that as an added value. It would also serve as overflow parking for the beach site, but that would be something that will also be priced out for your consideration as well. So that's kind of the summer plan. As far as things we just need to still wrap up on the district. Hilltop, the question has come to heat or not to heat. That is the question. So Northwest Kent Mechanical is recommending that we don't fire up the boilers for the winter. The boilers are semi-functional at best, and there's some real concerns around the pipes. There's scale and things built up inside those pipes. It limits the ability of the water to flow through the pipes to keep the building. So there's some question, when you've got reduced flow, increased pressure on the pumps, just some real questions about the soundness of that system. But Triangle Construction, took a different approach in their recommendation. If we don't heat it, there will be pipes that burst. That's just the reality. And if you get moisture at high enough levels in infiltrating an interior of a building, the mold and other organic contamination is going to skyrocket significantly. And so Triangle's recommendation is to heat it to maintain. It will buy us a little bit more time to make some decisions, even if that does mean there will be some additional costs just in terms of heating the building, number one, but also if there are repairs or maintenance that has to take place. We know that that's going to be, that would have to be a part of the budget. So our position right now is we're going to keep the building at least for the foreseeable future to buy us some more time. Triangle is working on completing a comprehensive needs assessment for you. They'll be ready to present that to you at the December board meeting. It will include an overall scope of need with some really high level estimates in terms of what it would take to get that building stabilized. It's not just a matter of replacing the boilers or replacing the pumps. All the infrastructure, the pipes are over 100 years old in many cases. That years of use, years of sediment, years of contamination, they're just the heating system really would have to be completely redone. And so there will be some costs that are coming through. The triangle will be here to present you with that comprehensive needs analysis. Just so again, you've got a sense of what we're looking at as far as keeping that building online. We have a meeting Thursday morning with Northern Analytics. We're gonna just kind of start listening to some of their thoughts on asbestos abatement. We know the building has asbestos in it. And so, what will be the cost of removing the asbestos? We've got to remove the asbestos regardless of what we do. And so whether we remove the asbestos for a renovation or we remove the asbestos for demolition, both of those outcomes require us to remove the asbestos ahead of time. And so that's a step that we would need to take regardless. So we're going to start exploring that as an option as well for your consideration, coming up in December, early January. So any questions on future projects or are thinking right now around Hilltop? Okay. Getting in then to existing projects. So 40 years ago, in 1985, a band called the Talking Heads wrote a song called The Road to Nowhere. And the Talking Heads wrote that song, and it was a metaphor for life, right? Well, in 2025, the road to nowhere has a new meaning. Because we lost our bid to create a minimalized solution for accessing the cold storage. So we had a crew on site this morning, starting to create a pathway for our sidewalk to the cold storage. So that'll be completed this week. Once that's completed, there should be no blockades preventing us from having access to that building. So we're hoping that we're headed in the right direction. And the number came in less than what we anticipated. We were able to avoid having to create any switchbacks because of the incline that depending on how we brought the sidewalk in. And so the number is going to be somewhere closer to $19,000 compared to the $35,000 number that we were thinking before. So, but I finally feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the cold storage building, and it is not an oncoming train. Another good news: the weight room flooring was shipped a week ahead. We're expecting that to arrive tomorrow. And so now Vic and the team, Sony's team will be working with Sony and Triangle Construction to make arrangements for installation to get the flooring, the pieces cut out and removed that need to be replaced, new flooring installed, and hopefully that's going to go very, very smoothly. And we're excited for that direction. At Beach Elementary, they're buttoning up some punch list items. There's still some little areas, painting, some just little things that are out there that they're working on. They've completed the staining process of the exterior brick on the original portion of the buildings, and that looks great from the road. Color matched up very, very nicely. They're finishing the installation and some of the roof flashing. That was a question mark that our roofing company is working on and making sure that that's buttoned up. And then I'm happy to share we had hosted almost 30 people who wanted to walk through the building last Wednesday night for tours. And so Amy McCarthy and Diane Bruckmiller and Stafford Trapp did an outstanding job putting together and arranging the tours. Dan Scoville and myself led the tours, and so it was just a neat way to kind of show people from the community, some of the neat things that are happening at Beach Elementary School. So the feedback was very positive from those tours. So that's kind of the extent of where we are from a bond perspective. Any questions? Okay, you're very, very welcome.
All right, moving forward, 25-26 overnight field trip request, second reading. Pretty typical, we've known about the East Coast trip for lots of years.
Yeah.
It's on Bradge, isn't it? Any questions? Okay, then we moving on to E, the emergency removal policy was scheduled for November, but we've had that for discussion now, so here we are.
Further questions on that?
No, the second read.
Okay. What, can you read that? So I wasn't present for last week. Can you read the language that was discussed at the last month for my benefit?
Once I pull it up from last month's meeting,
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna do that too.
no worries. So it's a lengthy document. We read it word for word, we're gonna give you a summary.
Yeah. From this pop up on the screen, or no? Probably can't, without getting up there real quick.
No, we can,
Okay, we can do it.
can you log into last month's
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah.
That may be the fastest.
Okay, I'll do it.
So it's 5610, it's an attachment down in the meeting from October 13th. The big difference is it broke the suspension window down into segments. So 0 to 5, a principal can suspend a student for up to 5 days. If the suspension is beyond 5 days, up to including 10 days, the principal and the superintendent would be needing to be involved in that decision. If it was more than 10 days, but less than or equal to 45 days, then that would have to be a decision that was supported by the superintendent, a board president, and then 2 additional members of the executive committee of the executive committee of the board. So either the vice president and the secretary, the vice president and the treasurer, just 2 of those 3 additional seats on the executive committee would also need to support the suspension, the long-term suspension for up to 45 days. And then beyond that, for any suspension exceeding 45 days, so between 45 and 60, it's still viewed as a long-term suspension in the eyes of the state. But we would have a full board hearing, the full board would vote on long-term suspensions between 46 and 60 days. Anything beyond a 60-day suspension in the eyes of the state is defined as an expulsion. And then the expulsion would obviously be voted on by the full board.
And the language in pink is the Neola language, and the language in green was the discussion language.
The language in pink. The language in pink is language that is been stricken or pulled out, removed.
Okay.
The green language is the new language that is being proposed. That's it.
And so the thinking, that period of time in 10 days to 45, the thinking is that would expedite the process without having the full
Correct.
board.
Yeah. So if it's the, 3rd week in April and it's students made some decisions that are not in their best interests or impacting the educational experience of others. The superintendent, the board president, and 2 other members of the executive council, the executive committee could suspend that student for the remainder of the year. Wouldn't be an expulsion, they'd automatically be enrolled for the following year. But that subgroup could suspend a student for, longer than 10 days, but less than 46 days.
And then it's recommended, or that's what this group decided, in a sense?
That's what this group decided.
The reason I was asking is because I was thinking in particular with the open feedback, there's some language around to give more than a handful of us together making board decisions. And it's not been communicated openly.
Not more than 4 members,
4 members, so that's where you have,
2 executive members.
Not
that's
more
three,
than
That's 3 so far.
okay, that's good, all right, just to make sure. Yeah. Thank you for reading about that.
You're so welcome.
Anything else on that? Any questions, thoughts? Okay. Then discussion item F.
But I do have one, sorry, I do
No,
have
you're fine.
about
Go ahead.
So one more thing about that, just thinking, I'm trying to remember, I wanna make sure, give it some thorough thought. We did have a case, and without details, of course, I thought we had a case where it was an odd time frame, but there was an opportunity for some conditions to be met for that student to be reinstated. And if we were to go with the proposed language here, while you wait for that student, potentially, could we be delaying students coming back that were given a longer term, but then had to meet conditions, or I just want to think it through, because it's
The
a,
implications.
yeah, what's the ripple effect that we're not thinking about?
Right, so we're just talking out loud.
Yeah.
So we had a student at the end of the school year last year who we suspended for more than 10 days because it was the middle of May. But the board did not expel the student. The board voted to indefinitely suspend the student. So under definition, an indefinite suspension could be up to 60 days, but not more than 60 days. The suspension of more than 60 days would be an expulsion. So that would give the student 60 days, 60 school days to complete the preventative measures that the board put in place. So I don't know that it would not have, with that student, the plan was to, have them complete the necessary steps over the summer in order to, enroll and have a successful launch to the 2025-2026 school year. So the only thing had this policy been in place for the 24-25 school year, that decision could have been made without requiring a full board meeting to approve the recommendation.
Yeah, so if if you do if the decision is to suspend a student pending investigation or something like that, are we looking to incidences? The number of days would be unknown.
Yeah, we might say an indefinite suspension pending the outcome of a behavioral threat assessment, or pending the outcome of a psychological evaluation, or pending the outcome of a detox, something like that. That indefinite suspension could not go past a length of 45 days without further action from the board. So the board at that point could either decide to extend the long-term suspension for another 15 days, or they could elect to expel the student based on the progress or lack thereof that had been made during the initial window of suspension.
Moving back to our AAU's situation, we have that for food already.
Yeah, so that's where I think 3, you're in that
in violation.
So we would have to be like that, right?
Sorry?
It would have to be like that, right? You're gonna need 14, you can't have just 3, right?
Oh, if it's beyond 45,
Okay.
then we would have the full board.
Right, but what was the stipulation where it would be just the superintendent, board president, and then 2 executive? That would think that would.
Wonderful.
So if it was a long-term suspension, not an expulsion, a long-term suspension greater than 10 days, but less than or equal to 45 days.
But how does that not break open meetings law? And you only have 3 of us there.
It's not an official meeting of the board.
Oh.
Yeah, which is
Or
under three
understood.
at a
Yeah.
cost threshold provided.
Understood.
Essentially, it's a committee.
Yeah.
Where
Yes.
deciding to
Right.
make a committee.
Without having a meeting.
Right.
Because it's a little bit more lengthy. And did the parents retain appeal rights on that?
They do.
And yes, the
Right.
parents, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, just need to refresh.
No,
Yeah.
you're good.
So again, just I probably dig into that, I just wanna make sure we're making, I wanna digest it, because again, I'm catching up here a little bit. So if you were to if the building principal were to suspend a student for 5 days pending a something. Psychological evaluation or something, and it took longer than the 5 days to do that, you'd have to call an emergency committee meeting together, if it's longer than 10, how would you?
Yeah, if it's longer than 5, the principal and I would, or the principal and the superintendent would consult, and the superintendent and the principal can suspend up to 10. That's just like we have it now.
Yep.
Okay, if it was going to be beyond 10, then what we would do is reach out to the board presidents and, I'd start with the vice president, then I would go to the secretary. If all 3 of those individuals were in agreement that, we could extend the suspension to, it's a suspension of indefinite duration, but for the purposes of this initial fact finding, it can't exceed 15 days or something like that. And then we reach that 15-day point, either we have clarity or we don't, but then we could take further action. And so that could even be if it was October. If we've got a situation where it's October and it's a significant event. If the suspension goes beyond 10 days, the only option we have is to pull the whole board together and have a disciplinary hearing. So this really gives us an option to give us more flexibility and more time to really find out the details, to get to the core of the incident. At play. So typically, if you've got a student who is in possession of alcohol or possession of, and they were selling narcotics, those require very little investigation. It's, these are the facts of the case. We have video evidence, we have multiple witnesses who saw it. That doesn't require any extended amount of time. We can suspend for 10 pending a board action if we're going for expulsion. But there are times that involve behavior that do take more time. Particularly if we are seeking information from outside counsel, whether it be upon arrests or other mental health support providers. Sometimes those appointments take longer to arrange. It can really eat up those days quickly, where all of a sudden it's day 9, we don't have the details we have, but we still have to have a formal board hearing to extend the suspension beyond 10 days. So this just gives us a little bit of flexibility.
So this is modified, what was the original language?
Right now, it's any suspension greater than 10 days, the board has to act.
Okay. So this is the piece that initiates the committee action, and that's basically the.
And the committee option would only be, we're not looking to modify the whole process, but if there would be benefit to buying a little bit of time. Or to not have to pull together the full board if it's a window of, or just the remainder of the semester.
I'll just review the applicants and the decision.
So try to think about student experience, or the parent experience in this situation. So again, just mention this big topic, I guess, but you're talking about, discipline can be, right? So from their perspective, they would have met with, the student would have met with the principal, so they would have had one meeting there for 5 days. This is something that kind of drags on or becomes something bigger as we go. And then we would potentially bring the student and parent before the committee. They would have a second meeting and then maybe a third meeting with the full board or something. I mean, what would
No. They would meet
We're
with
just gonna deal with that.
myself and the
Admin.
principal,
Okay.
yeah, and then I would reach out, share the details of the situation.
Got it, okay, all right, thank you, that helps a lot.
Yeah. So we really, this would not apply if we were looking, if it was a matter that would be an expulsion now, a permanent expulsion now, this would never play it. We've never seen this. This is really more about those unique windows where it's, a short period of time until the end of the semester, or a situation where we need more time for an individual to get the details surrounding the behavior. Good questions, good discussion.
All right. And then moving on to F, the term policy.
This one I can read. Or you can look it up. The current language, members of the board shall be elected by the school electors for terms of 4 years. And then the proposal is to add a comma and then add with only 3 consecutive terms.
So I had a question. So the proposed language was 3 consecutive terms, so would that mean a board member could serve 3 consecutive terms, be off the board for a number of years, and serve again? Or is the intent of this really a total of 3 consecutive terms?
It's not quite as complex as 3188, but that is something that we would have to, that.
How are we controlling this? When the law, the only requirement of the law is to live in the district or be 18. How are we saying, no, you can no longer be on that?
Everyone has an opportunity to run for this position, like, I don't know, as long as, again, even have the county, so I don't understand.
How did you let the county know that 4 year term, but it's 6 year term?
And I think it's on the ballot.
So wouldn't it be on the ballot, but it can't be 3 consecutive terms then? It'd be the same way as 6 year terms or 4 year terms.
Well, the election, the ballot language does not include the policy language. The ballot language just includes the duration of the term. So like sometimes we have people who are appointed to a position where, let's say someone is elected for a 4 year term, they resign after 2 years. There's an individual who is appointed to fill the remainder of that term. And they're appointed by action of the board. But then in order for them to serve a new term, they would have to be elected by in an official election.
You know what happens when you don't get enough people to run for the board, then isn't it, there's a committee or something that will select people, like.
Yeah, so the Kent
to
ISD,
serve on the board.
Kent ISD would actually we would, actually, this happened in Granville.
Yeah.
And so they, go to the community, they, identify individuals who are interested in the position, but didn't want to run for the position, so people, submit an application, to the Kent ISD school board. And then the Kent ISD school board, either, depending on how many people, submit applications, they might interview all of the candidates. Or they might, identify a subgroup of that candidate pool to interview. And then they interview those individuals, and then the Kent ISD board selects
So basically,
the members.
it's not really the voters who get an opportunity to vet and pick who they want on the board in that instance.
If there are
You're
enough
getting whoever
candidates.
an ISD wants to put in that
Yeah.
position. So you run that risk when you're trying to limit how many terms people can.
That's if you don't have anybody running, but you don't know that one.
We hardly had anyone run these past few years.
So, one other thought would be if we wanted to put this on there. Which my personal opinion is no, I don't. But if we did, I don't think that we can require this. It could be recommended.
Yeah.
It's recommended, it could be a practice that we have, but as far as
I
requiring,
don't think we.
I don't think we can.
We-
it would be something we'd have to check with attorneys, which this wasn't on the agenda for tonight, so. Having that time to check wasn't part of the process tonight. But I think that we would need to, because this could be a liability issue for us.
I can do that. Reach out to Marshall Gray and have him look into it for our meeting in November.
So a couple of other things I did, thank you guys for sending me to the MASB conference, where I did get to ask a couple of board members outside of the district, and they kind of were in the same thinking, like, we're very concerned on the legality of it. And brought up again, just the only state requirements are living districts and U18, so, how can we require that above and beyond the state? The other thing that I noticed is during the delegate assembly, the very first thing they did to recognize the board members was have those that have served 5 years, and those that have served 10 years stand up. And within that 5 to 10 range, there was a good majority of board members, so there were probably 500 plus board members at the conference. When we got into, I think we jumped to 20, 30, 40, those numbers were way up. It's pretty rare to get somebody above 12 years serving. And they're there, the conference theme was innovation and leadership, and they're there to learn how to be a better leader. So it's very inspiring to see volunteers be committed to students to a very good cause. So I don't know, that's all I'm gonna say about it.
Well, to your point about the numbers decreasing, I did a little bit of research. And the average, this was nationwide. So I was trying to find more specific data, but it was 6.7 years is the typical term. So, on average, I mean, it is quite a lower.
I just feel the longer you're on the board, you bring a wealth of knowledge also. There's so many policies and so many just rules and the way you have to do things on the board. And so I like how you two rely on each other, of you'll remind Heidi of how to motion or whatever, you know what I mean? Certain, and even when Shannon was on the board also, it's a wealth of knowledge, experience to also help. Because when I first came on the board, it was overwhelming. It really was overwhelming because there's certain processes and the way you have to do things, the way you have to speak, the way the Open Meetings Act and situations like that. So I will vote no on term limits. I don't believe in it. I don't think it's appropriate. I like having new, also, you know, mid-level and then also seasoned. So I am just gonna be quite honest. No, I don't want term limits and I will vote no.
I mean, the term limits of 3 years, that's 12 years. I mean, the person should be able to pass the knowledge on to a new person coming in. In that 12 years, somebody that's been on board for 20 years does have experience, that also leads into corruption too. You have
There's no
people
corruption
that,
on this board and I'm very offended by you even recommending that. You've been here
they
for 1
can be
year,
asked
so let's
to
just
bring
stop
up
right
all
now.
weekend, last week.
Last week,
Well, let's stay focused here.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you wanna talk about corruption. So, who came up with 4 years? Was it state or was it this board?
Well, we did actually change the policy.
It was 6.
It was 6.
Yeah, it was 6, this was reduced down to 4.
So,
When I was appointed, I was completing a 6-year term. And
so
then-
originally, it's typically been 4 years. The state shifted the, timing of elections, which pushed boards to go to a 6-year term. So it was generated from the state, and that 6 years, but we have since, we looked at that and dropped that down to a 4-year, term limit. I did get to talk to some other members and had a mix of people there at the conference around my table, at least where some were still at 6, most were at 4. So, you know, it's been originally just timing, election timing, so.
I think when I first remember, there was like 2 seats that were still 6, and then there was like, I think 5 that were 4, I can't remember, something like that until everybody could get. I like the 4.
6 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that was a part of the reason we dropped that down to 4 years is it's too hard to find people willing to commit to 6 years.
Exactly.
A lot of things can change.
A lot of things do change.
So if it's not state mandated for 4 years, we did be on here for 10, is what you're saying?
Well, that actually I was gonna mention it, so it's great.
Yeah, it's kind of
I
curious.
just Googled it because we're sitting here. Looks like, there is Michigan legislature, the language says that a school district shall be elected to school electors for the terms of 4 or 6. So they got language that lets the district make a decision.
Thank you.
Section 3.11. But at least that's right, that's what I quickly found.
Okay, you ready to move on? Okay. That closes, the discussion items and we move forward. We do have a closed session item. So I would entertain a motion to move into closed session.
So moved.
I'm going to read pursuant to the Opens Meeting Act, section 8K for safety and security planning.
So moved.
Support. All right, any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Lund,
Yes.
Trustee Patton,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser.
Yes.
President Reed, yes, motion carries. We're gonna move over to. Okay, let the record show we are rolling back into open session at 8:40. And we land with public comment. This is time before we hear from the public. Not to solving problems, but to listen. Ms. Gus, do we have any cards for any speakers? We do not. Close public comment. Moving forward to our action items for this evening, we have the 25-26 overnight field trip request. It's the 2026 8th grade East Coast trip as has been for many years. I would entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Lund,
Yes.
Trustee Patton,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, motion carries. That brings us to the high school course proposal name change, and I would entertain a motion for as presented and for the minutes. Let's state which course it was.
Pre-calculus to
AP, pre-calculus to AP calculus, right?
so moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager?
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore?
Yes.
Trustee Lund?
Yeah.
Trustee Patton?
Yes.
Trustee Bowser?
Yes.
President Reed? Yes, the motion carries. That brings us to the communication portion of this evening, and you have all my communication. Matt has a few things.
We have two together.
No, that was just for discussion.
Okay, I was just, I thought you had me for action, but I thought
No.
you were just. Sorry about that.
That's all right. All right. MASB sharing there.
Sure. Delegate assembly, everything passed as it was written. We did have, it was supposed to be a really quick delegate assembly, but, there were some issues with other sections that people brought up. So they kind of be a little bit longer, in fitting with last year's. You guys need to start those meetings. That's all I'm gonna say. They are very interesting and, they can be long, but, so anyway, it did pass. The other two that were brought up, for existing stuff did not pass. One was a, language in supporting books for kids of all, race, age, sexual orientation, couple of other words in there. So it's existing language that was there. And NASB was just trying to keep it open for everybody, everybody's learning style and type, desire to learn from. So some people had issues with that. And, but again, like I said, it was voted to maintain that language as it was. And that was something that came up last year. So it was just something, again, people were taking issue with. The other one was, medical. Trying to remember what so this was another delegate. And she asked for them to remove a certain section, talking about vaccinations. And so that, was brought to the entire assembly and voted on. So just wanted to report on those. The conference itself was really good. They had two very good keynote speakers. One was, addressing, like I mentioned before, innovation in leadership. He did a phenomenal job. That was George, I think his last name is Kupos, maybe everybody knows, but just a nationally known speaker. Very inspirational. And then the other gentleman, can't remember his name, but he did his presentation on leading through complexity. Again, that was just a good keynote speaker presentation overall, and very helpful in thinking about how we as leaders should look at what we're doing in light of the current circumstances around us, society, but also kind of honing in towards individual students. And they were both very student focused, as we should be as a board, and very inspirational. Did a few of the clinics outside of the keynote speakers. One was on AI. And that was very informative, how it's changing the future of everything, really. And I would recommend you guys to take some courses on AI. That just was done by Michigan Virtual. Forget his name when I saw him at the Spring Institute, and he did a very good job of just even updating from the spring to now. There's been changes and just how it's being utilized in classrooms, and it's very exciting. I've heard two sides. It's very polar opposite, right, as far as AI and education. And during the attorneys conference, they had one opinion, which was very negative, especially in light of how people will just, chat GPT any legal issue, and then they get the results of that. And a lot of times those, the chat GPT part is not, it's just not vetted through. They lack understanding of how it's applied. And so they have to inform. And it just kind of compounds their job. So, you know, that's one side is very negative. As well as all of the other stereotypical things that go on with AI. The other side is, AI is here to stay. How do we use it as a tool? And there's a lot of, even the keynote speakers, the AI clinic session, we're focused more on that. How to utilize it, not only in the workplace with teachers, but also down to the student level. And how can we better understand the uses and the potentials of that. One of the things the speaker said, it's there. And yes, there's negative things about it, for sure. Those are gonna be there. You know, the evil aspect of AI is going to be there. But how can we shed some good? And, so that was informative. On Sunday, I did, as I mentioned earlier, took the safety and security course. That was a great refresher, just to, you know, remind myself of all the things that are out there. But it also was really helpful because it was 10 ISD guys, but they use serious writers and quite a few of their scenarios and recommendations. So that was a point of pride for us. Little pat on the back there, but yeah, it just was really nice to go there, to be able to chat with other board members, and to just kind of engage with the happenings going on in other districts. And I was able to also share some of the things going on with us and get feedback, you know. So it was a great learning opportunity, and thank you guys for sending me. I do have some of the information, the PowerPoint slides from a few of the presentations that I went to. Not all of them had PowerPoints, so they're not all in there, but feel free if you want to look through those. There's a lot of great information. And that's all I have.
All right.
Nothing new for me.
All right, so we have planning, so we have a November meeting coming up, so and you look before us on that, we got playoff games. And having no more business before the board, we will stand adjourned at 8:49.